This is Change Your Mindset Podcast, the podcast that helps change your life by helping change the mindset of the 99% into the 1% mindset. Here's your host, Adrian Gomez.
Welcome to Change Your Mindset. I'm your host, Adrian Gomez. Tim Grover. Most people have no idea who he is. Most people know who is Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, some of the greatest basketball players of all time. And who trained these amazing athletes? Tim Grover. This podcast is Change Your Mindset. If you want to be great, if you want to be successful, if you want to be anything in life, you have to change how you think. You have to change your mindset. And for Tim Grover, he has a mindset to be unbeatable. And you see that in Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Two people he trained. You have to do things differently than everybody else. And like I always say, if you want to be successful or great, do the opposite of what everyone else around you is doing. He had an interview and he talked about flaws. Most people think having a flaw is a bad thing. It makes you weaker, you can't achieve anything, and it sets you back, which is not true. He talks about Michael Jordan's flaws and Kobe Bryant's flaws, how those flaws actually made them to be some of the greatest basketball players of all time. And what these flaws were actually unique gifts. So if you have a flaw, possibly you can have a unique gift. So take a listen what he had to say about this.
If anybody got a chance to watch The Last Dance, Michael said, I have a competitive problem. I have a competition problem. Like, everything is a competition. Well, for most people, they'd be like, that's his flaw. He's always got to complete. He's always so intense. He's always wound up. Like, everybody tells him, unwind. You can't tell individuals like yourself, like me, to unwind. That's when we're the most uncomfortable. When we decide to unwind, it's because we want to unwind, not because somebody else tells us to unwind. So when you look at that, when people always say, oh, listen, you're too focused. You should relax. Right. You work too much. You're obsessed. With Kobe, it was always an obsession. You're obsessed. Those are flaws. But those flaws allow you to win over and over and over again. Initially, those may have been weaknesses, but when the individual recognized, you know what? These really are my weaknesses. These are the things that allow me to be different. It's what allows me to be unique, because winning wants you to be different. Winning requires you to do different things. Winning requires you to think in a different way. Winning speaks its own language. Winning has its own way of recognizing you. It's not the same. So winning requires you to be different, but being different scares a lot of people, which people think is a weakness. But once you recognize that difference is one of your greatest flaws that you have, the ability to stand out, now you start to actually see what winning's about.
Another thing he talks about is a process. Anything you're trying to do to be successful or to get to your goals in life, you have to do things that you don't want to do. You have to be disciplined and you have to be consistent. Sometimes you don't feel like working out, you have to go work out. Your brain is the one that stops you from doing certain things. It's up to you to control it, to not let it control you. A lot of people say you have to enjoy the journey, and as he says, the process. There's a lot of things to be doing while you're on that journey or process that you're not going to like. So you can't always enjoy the journey or the process. And here's Tim Grover talking exactly about that.
To me, everyone talks about the process. They say you got to love the process. You got to love the process. I agree with that, but I also kind of disagree with that, because to me, you have to do the process. The process is non-negotiable. It's just, you have to do it. All right. So if you have to do something, I don't have highs about it or lows about it. I know it has to get done. And if I let my emotions get involved in it, all right, it's not going to get done to its best abilities. So if people say you got to love the process and then something comes in the process that you don't really love, because there's no way everybody loves 100% of any process. All right, we look at this beautiful setup that we have here that we're looking at. To set all this up is a very tedious process, and how meticulous it has to be. And nobody's here whistling and saying, oh, this is wonderful to do. Let me see how all the lights are. But you have to do it. You have to do it. You take the emotions out of it and you do it. The process is a non-negotiable thing. All right. The end result is not always there. That win isn't always there. You can go through the whole process and somebody didn't be as meticulous as you, and they may get that win. Because winning has no loyalty to any of us. You know, people that don't work as hard, they end up getting that win. People that aren't as qualified for the job, they end up getting that win. Do you stop the process? No. You continue to get more maniacal with the process over and over and over again. And part of the process that's so important, and I talk about this in the winning thing, is there's so much information that's out there. When individuals start to do the process, they get in this mind frame of what to think. Because somebody else is saying, this is how the process is supposed to be done. These are the steps that you have to take in each process. And they lose their ability on how to think. No one told me to count Michael's steps. No one told me to say, hey, when he's working out, only do 8 reps on this side and do 2 reps on this side. There was no books out there. I mean, this was way before Fitbit and all that other stuff, but I needed to know in order to effectively do the process correctly. If I'm going to go through it, I might as well do it the best of my ability and do it right. So I'm going to go through these steps. These are necessary in order for my client and for myself to know I'm going through the process the way it should be going through, the way I want it to go through, so I can get that end result. The process is non-negotiable. It's just like, you have to do it. I don't care what you do. You know, a lot of routines in the morning that people go through, it's a process. It's a process to get you either closer to winning or farther.
You hear people say, learn from your mistakes. And I made a podcast, fail, and fail again, but never quit. Most people are going to fail. If you start a business, 90 and 95% of small businesses usually eventually fail. It's not easy. Most people never learn from the mistakes. They think they're going to make it big by doing it one time. That's not reality. That's not how life works. You're going to fail, and you don't want to quit. But you need to learn what you did wrong and get better from it, for you can be successful. And as Tim Grover says, to know what winning is, you have to go through losing over and over again. That's the only way. And this is what Tim Grover says about it.
It's interesting that you said that I know about winning. The reason I know so much about winning is because I've had to deal with so much losing.
That's interesting. What do you mean by that?
Everybody wants to win, but in order to know how to win, you got to know how to lose. Because you're going to lose more than you're going to win. But every time you lose, what do you gain from it? So every time I've lost, people say you got to jump right back up. You know, get back right on your feet again. And I disagree with that. After you lose, or when you get knocked down, stay down there for a minute. Understand why you lost. What were the reasons? Why are you down here? Why did you lose? Why did you get knocked down? Because if you just jump right back up, you're going to lose again. and again, and you're continually going to lose the same way. So every time I lost, I stayed down for a second. Minutes, hours, days, weeks. But when I stood up, I was different. I was smarter. And when I lost again, I stayed down. I stood back up. I was stronger. When I lost again, I stayed down. How did I stand up again? I was more confident. Lost again. Stood up. I was more resilient. Now you start putting the pieces that are necessary to win over and over and over again. So if you lose and you jump right back up and you haven't really changed, really changed from that loss, you're never going to learn from it, and you're never going to really, truly know the unforgiving race to greatness, because that's part of the unforgiving part, is the losing part. That part is unforgiving.
There's a story that Tim Grover is going to talk about right now, and it's something a lot of people don't understand. Sacrifice. If you want to be great, successful, whatever your goal is, your dream is, you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice a lot. And before, when I was young, I can relate to his story because when my father worked, he worked a lot. We didn't do much because he was always tired, and days off, he would always sleep. When I was younger, I didn't understand because I wanted to do things. I wanted to go out, vacation, do what the other kids did. But my father sacrificed a lot to provide a better life, opportunity. And then he started his own business. And he sacrificed literally everything to start that business and make it successful. And at the time, I didn't understand it. But now that I'm older, I understand what it takes to get where you want to be successful. You have to sacrifice. That's the only way you can get there. Most people will never understand what it means to sacrifice because people are unwilling to sacrifice anything because they're too comfortable being what they're at in life. And they're unwilling to sacrifice anything to get to their goals in life. But sacrifice is what it takes. And until you go through it, you will never understand. But once you go through sacrifice and you see the reward at the end, you will understand. So here's Tim Grover's story.
Yeah.
So my work, when I was working with my professional athletes, it required me to do a lot of traveling, a lot of leaving at short notice. And this story gets me every time. So when people say, it didn't hurt, it still hurts. I was packing for a trip. My daughter walks into the room. She says, "Dad, why do you travel so much?" I said, "Sweetheart, this is how I provide for the family. This is how I take care of you and Mom. This is how I put food on the table." She looks at me, says, "Daddy, if I eat less, will you stay home more?" Now people would think in a fairy tale, or most people would say, I unpacked my suitcase, I'm not going to take this trip, honey, let's go grab some ice cream or let's go out. I kept packing. I kept packing.
Why?
I had to set an example for her early of what it meant to win and what you have to leave behind sometimes in order to pursue what's unique to you. And I wanted her to understand that this is who I am. I can't be anybody else. I always want you to see the real dad, the real person. And I want to set an example for you. And I was fortunate enough that those sacrifices that I did make early, I had a conversation with her later on to tell her why I did all those things. And in the middle of the conversation, she stopped me. She goes, I get it. I understand. She saw the results. She saw how it brought us closer together. She understood my dedication to my craft and what it took to excel and what it took to be different and what it took to stand by unpopular decisions of others, knowing that every successful person that I've met, every successful person that I know had to make those decisions over and over again that affect other individuals that are so close and so dear to them.
Like Tim said, the average person, or in a fairy tale, they wouldn't have packed and gone out with a kid. But most people, and if you do understand his story, I commend you. Because most people don't understand it. What it takes to sacrifice, to get where you need to in life. It takes a lot of sacrifice. To the average person, they will never understand. That's why I think that story like that is so powerful. Because it shows you even the emotional sacrifice you have to go through, that you have to give up to be great at your craft. And that's why I think it's one of the most powerful stories out there. Like he said, every successful person has to make sacrifices just like this. But you won't see it and you won't hear about it because it's done in private. You only see their success in public. You don't see the hardships and decisions they have to make, the very hard decisions they have to make in private. You never see those. But those decisions and sacrifices is what makes you and turns you into being great. You may not agree with his decision or decisions like that, but that's what separates the average person to someone that's great. As I always say, 99% of people compared to the 1%. And this was Tim Grover's last message to people that want to be great.
If I had 60 seconds, I would tell them that stop looking for steps. Stop looking for things that say 5 steps to winning, 10 steps to greatness, 8 steps to success. Those steps are infinite and they're constantly changing. And just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there. Find your own path to winning. Because as the late, great Kobe Bryant said, winning is everything. Winning is everything. The way it makes you feel. The way it makes your family feel. The way you feel when your children win. The way you feel when your significant others win. The way you feel when you've touched other lives and they win. Those steps are infinite, but you got to trust yourself that they're there. And sometimes you got to run up those stairs. Sometimes you got to crawl up those stairs. And sometimes you get all the way to the top and You got to start all over again.
All the people that I talk about, that go over their mindset, they all do the same things. They all think the same, which is the opposite from the average person. And I will continue to go into successful people and their mindsets. And you will see how they all have very similar, if not the same mindset. That's going to be it for this podcast. I appreciate, as always, you guys taking time out of your valuable day to listen to my podcast. Like I said, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, greatest of all time, they're obviously a different beast. And their trainer, same exact thing, different mindset. Hopefully you understand that and can incorporate some of this into your own personal mindset. As always, thank you Patron member Blade262 for being a Patron member and helping support this podcast. Truly helps. And if you want to be a Patron member as well, ask questions, comments, or have ideas for future podcasts, you can do that by being a Patron member. The link is in the description below. As always, please share, subscribe, comment if you enjoy the podcast. Helps push this podcast and helps with the algorithm for it reaches more people. Hopefully helps others as well. And I appreciate it. Thank you guys as always. I wish you the best. Keep improving every single day. Be the best version of yourself. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Change Your Mindset podcast. Be sure to tune in every week for a new episode. As always, change your mindset to change your life.